I see you've come back for some more fun. So today we're going to learn about some important Android development topics known as adapters and adapter views. So let's just kind of take a quick little step back and see where we're at in the course here, if you've been following along with the other topics. So we kind of went through some of the getting started material, some stuff with intents and activities. And those were just kind of to get the ball rolling, getting you up to speed with Android. Then we started to talk about some, introductory level of difficulty topics that would be fun and interesting. We talked about menus, preferences, and dialogues. All three are important skills. There are things that people use in their app all the time. And they're hopefully pretty easy to get your brain around. It's just kind of a matter of learning what the APIs are. Now we're going to start stepping into a slightly more complex topic. We're going to be talking about this adapters and AdapterViews. So today is the kickoff first app we're going to do with that, and we'll do a couple, and there'll be some things you can do in lab as well. So the title of this one, this app is called ListView BaseAdapter. Those are some funny sounding words for now, but after we introduce you to the topic a little bit, hopefully the name of this app will make sense for why it's called ListView BaseAdapter. So the type of list, or the type of adapter view that we're going to be using in this app is called a list view. What a list view is it's really just a table. It gives you scrolling for free, so you can kind of scroll through the table, and it's vertically scrolling with individual rows. Each of these individual rows is actually its own view. In this demo, they're text views. This was stolen from one of the Google tutorials. But a list view is just one of many of the different types of adapter views. An adapter view is really just something, it's a view that will contain multiple subviews, where each of those subviews are kind of similar in structure. There are a lot of different types of adapter views. So there's list view, which we'll deal with today. There's grid view, which it's just kind of set up instead of in individual rows. There are squares or rectangles that go across and then down. Just to share, an adapter view can really be any different type of view. Here it's a text view. Here it's an image view, but it really could be anything. Other types of list views, this one's a spinner. We'll talk more about spinners later. There's also a Google tutorial on spinners. And this one's a gallery that lets you kind of pan back and forth. These are images, but again, it could be something different. It could be a text view, whatever you'd like. If you were to read Google's definition for what is an adapter view, they say an adapter view is a view whose children are determined by an adapter. That's a great definition and all, assuming you know what an adapter is. So let's go ahead and say, what is an adapter? What an adapter is an adapter is the bridge between the data and the things that you see on the screen. So it takes the data, and it takes like a template, like a blank view, puts those two things together, and it produces all the views that go into the table. The way I like to call it is I say that an adapter is really just a view factory. For an adapter view. It serves up the views. So you give it as inputs the data and some type of blank template, and it outputs all those different views. Because I like to make things visual, that's just how they stick in my brain better. You can see what it would look like here. So an adapter receives these two things, and it puts the views into the adapter view. For today's example, our adapter view is going to be a list view. And our adapter, we'll talk more about this as we get into it, it's going to be a BaseAdapter subclass. This is what the app is going to look like. It's going to have a series of rows, and we're going to slowly change what those rows look like as we get farther into the app. And we're also going to let you click on things and add more views. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. So make a new project, call it ListView BaseAdapter. Because that title got a little long for me for the application name, I called it ListView BA, and then I went ahead and made my activity ListView BA. So go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and get that made. I'll get it started up as well. So File, New, Android Project, ListView, BaseAdapter. Since I've done it already, I'm going to have to call mine Video. And then my application I chose to shorten a little bit, ListView BA. And my package, usually just the reverse domain of whatever you happen to own. And pick whatever SDK you want. This has been around since 1.5, maybe even older, so I'm just going to choose that one. Great. And you can see we get all the basic stuff. Sometimes it's nice to go ahead and fire off your emulator now just to get it launching. Looks like I've had mine launching before. And just kind of make sure everything's happy-go-lucky. So what we're going to choose to do is we're going to choose to make a main.xml that is going to have a button on it, which we're pretty used to. And then it's also going to have a list view. List views are a little bit annoying in XML because you can't see them, right? So you can't see what they're going to look like until you run the code. So it's just going to kind of be a blank space in the XML. So we're going to do the best we can with it. And what I'm going to do is we're just going to put those in a linear layout and give them both an ID that you can remember, at least for for at least a minute or two. So I say just go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and get that made, and then I'll do it with you if you're having trouble. Cool, so I'll go ahead and get mine made. So if I come in here to the layout, I always like to have up as windows the views for properties and then the view for the outline. I find that pretty useful when I'm doing the XML stuff. So what I'm going to choose to do here is I'm just going to drag over a button, plop, and then I'm going to drag over a list view, plop. The list view, you can see it doesn't really show up. If you'd like to see it visually, these buttons, what they do is they show the outlines of all the views, and then they can also add a little space around them so you can kind of see where they're at. So if you do this, then you can kind of see the list view, which is kind of nice. But it does distort what the view is going to look like. And the text view we don't really need, so we'll blow him away. Trying to get this thing to look a little bit better, what I like to do is I like to add a little padding on the linear layout. Let's say we were to add basically 10 DPs all the way around. I actually added a little bit more on the right because there's going to be a scroll thing that comes in there. I thought it looked better with a little bit more padding. And then the button, we're going to make it take up the entire width. And the list view, we're also going to make sure it's taking up the entire width as well. Then let's go ahead and give them both an ID. So the button I'm just going to call Add View button. The text on it, I'm going to say Add View. You can see that I just typed in the words Add View for now. I'm going to show you a slick little way to turn it into a string resource after the fact that'll make your life a lot easier. The other thing that I wanted to do with the button, no, I guess that's it. That's all I really need to do with the button. Then the list view, you're going to need to give it an ID. I don't have a great name for it, so I'm just going to call it My List View. Should be easy enough. Really not much else to set on it. The other thing I was going to do with the button was show you that converting into a string resource trick. Sometimes my auto indenter doesn't like it when there are white spaces. Don't know why. So here's the trick. A student pointed this out to me a few weeks ago, and I haven't shown it in the video yet. If you highlight some text, so if you highlight Add View, and you want to make it a string resource, but it's so much trouble to go back and forth, if you come up here to, where is it at? Where to go? refactor. I think it moved on me from earlier today. There's a thing that you can do for extract string resource. You can see there's even a shortcut key for it, but if you were to have the text that you want to refactor highlighted and click extract string resource, it'll automatically pop up and say, hey, the string is add_view, replace it with r.string.add_view. It even makes it all lowercase for you and pretty like, and it's going to put it into strings.xml. And if you can do that, you can see presto, it just replaced it with a string resource. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's the convenience of just typing in what you want, along with the good programming practice of putting things into resources. So a couple people were really excited to see that. Great. So let's go ahead and let's do what we do best. Let's go ahead and capture these views. Usually we've made member variables for things like this when we've captured them, but everything's going to happen within onCreate, so it's okay just to capture them inside here. Also, my pointer is going to only point to this one thing, so I may as well make it final. That can also be handy because if you need it inside an anonymous inner class, then it's final, so you can use it. And there's no harm in doing it too, right? So let's go ahead and capture my list view. Great. And then let's go ahead and also capture that button. I'll just call it the Add View button. Cool. And then while we're here, the slides don't do this till later, but I'll just do it now. We're eventually going to want a listener for this button. And I wanted to go ahead and point out the button because it's so nice. Like if you start typing the words, you say control space, it auto-completes it. If you were to say new on-click listener and hit control space, like right now, like magic is going to happen. Control space, boom, magic. It fills out the whole thing, just gets it all set for you, which is super great. So it's built up very, very nicely. And then later we'll add a view when the button is pressed. But I just wanted to kind of show you how nice that autocomplete is for this, because some of the things we're going to do today, the autocomplete is not as nice. Catch the slides up a little bit here. Here's what my XML looked like if you got stumped on the XML. Here's what capturing those views looked like. And we can do everything right inside onCreate, so there's no reason to have a member variable for this app. So hopefully the name makes good sense. ListView BaseAdapter. We've made the ListView parts. Now it's time to make the BaseAdapter parts. So what we're going to do is we're going to subclass BaseAdapter, and we're going to make our own class. We're going to call it Row_Number_Adapter. Not a genius name, but good enough. It's going to be serving up the views. We're going to start with a text view, then we're going to show you how to serve up a button, then some image views. Then what we're going to spend the most time with today is serving up a custom linear layout, so our own compound control. So let's go ahead and make a new class. Name it Row_Number_Adapter. Its superclass is going to be BaseAdapter. To talk just a little bit more about BaseAdapter, what BaseAdapter is BaseAdapter is an abstract class, so you wouldn't create an instance of it directly. And as an abstract class, it has methods that you must override. And so by having this little checkbox for which method stubs would you like to create, inherited abstract method, that's going to create 4 methods for us. BaseAdapter implements the adapter interface because it is an adapter. It also implements the list adapter and spinner adapter. We don't really need the spinner adapter for now, but it takes care of it. And list adapter is something that you have to implement if you want to give views to a list. A list view. So let's go ahead and make that. So just right click, say new class, row, number, adapter, superclass, BaseAdapter. Make sure you have checked to create stubs for inherited abstract methods, because it's going to make a few of them. Click on finished. Cool. So what should happen is it should pop up and it should show you a few methods. It should show you get count, get item ID, and get view. I'm using a Mac, and mine did a nice job of popping up and saying, like in get view, it says position, convert view, and parent. Some of my students in class who were using Windows, it popped up and it just said like arg0, arg1, arg2. If yours says arg0, arg1, arg2, just type in the word position, convert view, and parent. Actually, mine did it right there, so that should say position as well, really. Obviously, the name isn't important, but it is nice to have a good name. That way it makes it clear what it is. Whereas, arg0 versus arg2, that doesn't mean much. So go ahead and change those, and we'll talk more about what they mean. So a summary of what they are. The two that are the most important are get count and get view. So the adapter, what it does is it gives information to the view. The very first question that gets asked is get count. So that adapter view needs to know, hey, how many views do I have coming? So it will call get count, and that will just return an integer for how many views there are. So it'll say like, hey, there's 1 view, or there's 10, or there's none. And then what it'll do is one by one, it'll call for the individual views, and it'll call get view. So get view, you can see it returns a view. So this is the primary thing that serves up those views. The other two are slightly less important. If you write a class that somebody else might use, obviously it's critically important that you implement all of the methods. But I'll say that if you're the one who's going to be using this adapter, it's okay if you just let them return, null and 0 if you don't really need them. So it's not going to be our first and foremost importance to implement those two. But what they do is get item. If this thing is kind of going through an array or something, it would return like the data that was used to go into that view. Get item ID. It would return like like the r dot ID dot text view something or other. We're not going to use it in this example. So let's go ahead and start adding some methods to the row number adapter. The first thing that I'd like to add is a constructor. Easiest way to make a constructor is to start typing in the class name, hit Control Space, and it will let you put in the default constructor. We don't actually want the default constructor. What we really want is we want to pass in a context. So a context can be a handy thing that you might want to use at a later point. So we're just going to store off a context. So I'm going to go ahead and import in what I needed to here and create a member variable that's a context called mContext. Cool. The other question that we got in class is, should we call super? And so I knew that you didn't have to, since it was an abstract class, and I went up and I looked up to see what constructors it did have. It does have a constructor, but it's got just the default constructor. And it didn't even really say anything about it, so I don't think you need to call the super constructor in this case. So I think you can just create the context and not worry about calling your super constructor. Cool. And if that's a bad plan, I'll figure out later, I'm sure. So at this point, we've created a constructor to pass in the context. So we actually can make one of these things now if we'd like. So let's go ahead and do that. So go ahead and hop back over to your ListView BA. And what we really want to do is we want to do two steps. We want to create the adapter, and then we want to bind the adapter to the adapter view. And so once you've made that connection, it'll know, like, the adapter view will know who to question to get the views. So creating the adapter, we called it row number adapter, and I'll just call my instance row number adapter. Same, just lowercase name. New row number adapter, and we're going to pass in a context. This is an activity, so we're just going to pass in this. I've been tempted, by the way, to name all of my activities like ListView BA activity, just to make it clear that that's the activity, but I haven't done that just yet. Also, if we want to reference this later inside an anonymous inner class, it needs to be final. It's going to only point at this object. Final just means that this reference can't point at any other object. It can only point at this object, and that's fine. So that's super. And then what we want to say is we want to say that the ListView set adapter is the important method, and we want to set it to the row number adapter. So there's the magic that binds the adapter view to the backing data. In this case, that backing data is just going to be inside that row number adapter class. So we could run it at this point, but it would not be very exciting, because the first question that would get asked would be get count, and you can see it returns 0. So I mean, in fact, if you'd like, you can run it. It will not be very exciting. So it is a list view with 0 views in it. Add view doesn't do anything yet, right? So let's start making, I want something to show up on the screen. So I want to use as little code as necessary just to get something up on the screen. So the one thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to, so I'm just getting the slides got up here, we're going to have to say a count. The easiest thing we could do if we just want to get something up on the screen is just to hard code it. And that's what we're going to do first. So we're just going to hard code it. We're just going to say, hey, there are 5 views, period. So no fanciness there. Then the next thing that's going to happen is the system is going to say, all right, so for those 5 views, it's going to call getView 5 times to get those 5 views. So let's talk about getView for a second. GetView, you can see, has 3 parameters, 2 of which should be pretty obvious. Position is like, which position is it? So is it 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4? The parent is a fairly obvious thing. The parent is what this is going into. So it's the view group that this is going into. So it would just be like the list view in this case. The interesting one is the convert view. What is the convert view? What the convert view is the convert view is something that's already in memory that was put into memory by the get view last time. So I made that sound more complex than it is. Let's say that you've made the table view once and you want to change the data in it. You have the option of reusing one of those views that's already in memory or creating a new one from scratch. It's much faster to create one that's already in memory and to modify it for use. So the structure that you see with these getView functions always goes like this. You make an initial view. I'll just type it in. So we're going to make an initial view. I'll just call it view. I'll set it to null so that the compiler doesn't yell at me while I'm in the middle of working. And then at the bottom you return it. Then in the middle you set it up, right? Oops, need a semicolon. And so the idea is this. If you haven't ever run this before, convert view will be null. And if it is null, then we want to create a new view. If it is not null, then we want to use the convert view. or we want to convert that view into the one we're going to use, right? So those are the two options that this typically looks like. So given that structure, what we want to do now is we want to return text views. So to return text views, and here's a summary of why convert views. It's just an efficiency thing. If you can modify the views that are in memory instead of making new ones, code runs faster. So what we want to make is we want to make text views, not just plain views. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this view is actually going to be a text view. So I make sure that the pointer is ready to point to a text view. I guess I should say reference instead of pointer, but it's all the same thing. If we've got to make a new one, then what we want to do is we still want to say new text view. Text view expects a context, so it's handy that we've got that context. We can just pass right in. If there's one already in memory, then that convert view is really a text view as well. So we're just going to typecast it to be a text view. So it's been made before. We're just pulling it out and reusing it. And then what we'd like to do is we'd like to set the text to be something simple. We'll just set it to be like the position, or we'll say, I think we said row plus position. So that should print like row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. Cool. So at this point, we've got enough that we can see it in action. We've got a count, and whenever they call getView, it's either going to make a new one or convert the convert view, and then it's going to set the text based on the position and display it. So let's give it a whirl. So you can see that it pops up and it looks just like we would expect. There are 5 views total, and they say row 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. So got a lot of good things going. We've displayed our first ever adapter view. How exciting. And so kind of from here, we're just going to add bells and whistles to show you some of the features, but you should kind of have the basic foundation already. First thing that'd be nice to add is it'd be nice if you clicked Add View. It feels like that should do something. So let's make it do something. So instead of hard coding 5, it's like 5 views, we're going to make a member variable. I'll just call it numRows. NumRows. And I'll just start it off at 5. And I suppose I should declare it at the top. It's just an int, numRows. And then if we want to be able to, add views, we need to be able to increment that value. So I'm going to make a public method. It won't return anything. And you can call it add row, or I think in the slides I called it add view. And really what it needs to do is it just needs to take the numRows and add 1 to it. You could say ++ if you wanted, or you could say numRows equals numRows +1, or I use the shortcut plus equals, however you want to do that. Cool. So now we're ready to change it. Let's go, when we click the button, let's call add view. So now we're ready to add that view. So we say, hey, Mr. Adapter, which is row number adapter, add view. And what that'll do is that'll increment that value that comes out of getCount. One more thing you've got to do. The other thing that you've got to do is you've got to inform it that the data has changed. And you call the function notify dataset changed. Cool. For the example that we're doing here, we could have put this inside AdView, but for things you'll do later and for most things you'll do, that won't be an option. So I just went ahead and kept them separate for now. So we're going to say AdView, and then we're going to say, hey, adapter, something changed. Really what this is doing is it's just marking it all as dirty, right? And it's just redrawing everything kind of from scratch. I think that if you were to get into this deeper, there's probably some more efficient solutions. But this just marks the whole thing as dirty, and it just cleans it all up. If you were to leave that off, it wouldn't know that it needed to redraw, is the catch. So now when we click on Add View, it should pop up a row number 5, and it did. Row number 6. You can add as many views as you like. I will say I'd recommend you add more than the screen, and you can see that you actually get scrolling for free, which is pretty neat with the list view. It automatically takes care of the scrolling for you. It takes care of your indicator here on the sides, and you can add as many clicks as your finger would like. Cool. So you can see that we can modify values in there, and it shows up visually. So that's kind of neat. Let's go ahead and get my slides caught up a little bit. Changing it to 5. I use ++ there, adding it, notifying it, and you can see that in my example here, I went ahead and made 99 rows. Let's add some more features to this app. The next feature that we'd like to add is the ability to click a row and have that call some listener. This could be really handy because these rows could be anything, right? So you could you could set up like a drill down menu to where you go into more specific activities. You could play a YouTube video. There's all kinds of things you could do. And there's a really nice listener set up called the On Item Click Listener. So buttons have an on click listener. List views have an on item click listener. So they just added the word item. And it's going to look a lot like a button, but it won't. Eclipse won't autocomplete it nearly as nicely. So we say set on item click listener, and you can hit Control Space, and it'll fill it out. And that part worked fine. Now here's the part that doesn't go as well. If you were to say AdapterView dot on item click, if we did this with buttons and we were to hit Control Space at this point, it would just presto fill in the whole thing. I'm gonna hit Control Space here and put this in. You can see it really didn't put in anything, so that was a pain. I'll add my semicolon now so I don't forget that later. So you can see it doesn't even know what an adapter view is. So you're going to have to do a Control-Shift-O to import that. And then if you hover over it, it'll say you've got to add unimplemented methods. So we say sure, add unimplemented methods. And it did this stupid thing again. It even did it to me where it says arg0, arg1, arg2, arg3. That's not the best name for those variables. Really what they should be called is parent for the adapter view, view, because that was like the view that got clicked on, the position for where it is in the list, like what the row number is, and then you can also get an ID for what that text view is. So let's go ahead and change those to say parent, view, position, and ID. So parent, view, position. Position is probably the most important one. And then ID. Cool. So what we would like to do is we would like to just make a simple little toast message that just says like, hey, you pressed row, whatever. So to make a toast, we just say make text. Done this a few times. Needs a context. Typically you'd just say this, but since this is inside an anonymous inner class, we're going to have to say ListView BA dot this. Cool. Then it wants the text. We're to say you pressed row, and then we'll just say whatever position it is that got clicked. Needs a duration. You can say toast.length short. And then if you'd like for your toast to be visible, you also have to call .show. That's the one that people forget sometimes, actually showing the toast. Cool. So at this point, if someone clicks on a row, it should play the toast. Let's see if it does it. So fire it up again. You can still add things to your heart's content. If I click on row 4, it says you pressed row 4. If I click row 1, it says you pressed row 1. I do occasionally get this like orange bar error, which is kind of annoying. Sometimes it happens to me, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why. I'm not overly worried about it. It's a little too low level for what we're going to deal with. It seems like if I use the arrows though and hit the D, that one never has the problem. But whenever I tap on it, sometimes it has issues. Great, so you can see that at this point, you could take whatever action you wanted when somebody clicks in a row. I mean, the sky's the limit, right? But we've made this connection between the view and the listener, and then from there, it's up to you what you do with it. Cool, so I'll catch the slides up a little bit. So that's the listener. We made it play just a simple little toast. We changed these to say the right things. And we got it to play to prove that we were connected. And then it's up to you what you want to do with it. So let's do a little bit more talking about views. So inside the Get View area, if you find your way back over there, you can see that we created a new view. And really there are kind of two areas. So right when you make the view, this area is for properties that are all the same. So if something needs to be set the same, you might do it up there. You could do it somewhere else, but it might make more sense to do it up here for efficiency reasons. But then this view this area down here is for properties that are different. For each view. So just to kind of show a quick example, let's say we wanted to set the text size and we wanted them to all be 18-point font. If we want them to all be the same, we can just set that up there, no big deal. For things that we want to be different, we've actually already got one example here, but let's add another one. I thought this looked kind of neat. You can set the text color, and you can actually make a color with an RGB. What I chose to do is just to kind of make some, I don't know, cute little combination of colors. I think in my slides I did this one. So my red value is just going to be whatever the position is times 10. That works pretty well for the first 25, then after that it gets a little wacky. The green component is going to be 255 minus position times 10, so it'll kind of start it fully green, then get less and less and less and less and less green, which is kind of neat. And then the blue I'll just keep always at 200. So let's go ahead and run this. We should see a new font size that's the same for all of them, and a color which kind of rainbows slightly different as you go. And the rainbow colors make kind of a neat effect. You can see that they start with a lot of green, 255, and a lot of blue, and then over time they get less green and more red. So red and blue makes magenta. And that'll continue to about row 25, and then after 25 you can see the red's going to roll over. So the red's going to go back to 0 red. So it's going to become a very funky looking I guess that's mostly blue. That doesn't even really look mostly blue. but there's some interesting combinations that kind of happen. So it's kind of neat. You can entertain yourself as much as you like. But that's bigger text because it's the same everywhere, but the color is different for each row. Great. The next thing that I want to do is text views are not the only thing that you can serve up. You can serve up all kinds of different things. So for example, instead of a text view, what you could choose to do is you could serve up a button instead. The places where you need to make the change is you need to change what the pointer type is, like what type of object it's expecting to point to. The constructor, if you want to make a new one, it has to be of the right type. The typecast, if you typecast the convert view. And then additionally, you have to make sure to set properties appropriate for that view. Text size, that one's actually okay for a button. Set text, that's okay for a button. The color, I think the color looks kind of bad with buttons. So if we were to change it just to, hey, say serve up buttons instead of text views, it does that no problem. So fire it off here, you can see that instead of text views, now we've got buttons for each of them. You can still add them, no problem. So we've got all kinds of buttons. One thing that you will notice, though, that you do have to be careful about is the button does consume the focus and consume the click. So your list on item click listener isn't seeing the click. I believe that there are things that you can do to set the focus to false, like, and make it to where the button can't be clicked and it actually calls the list view. To be honest, it's kind of easier to just like have the button call some function that you want, just like the list view would have. There's good and there's bad ways to do things. In the lab, we have the same problem because we're going to have a grid view inside a list view. We're going to have kind of the same issue, and we're just going to get around it there by having them both call the same function. So a little cheap fix. Just thought I'd mention that. Let's say instead of a button, you wanted an image view. No problems there either. So we just need to create a new image view, convert the convert view to be an image view, and the properties here are different, right? So set text size, that doesn't mean anything. Set text, that doesn't really mean anything. One thing we can do with an image view is we can set the image resource. Really, you would typically set them to like different images that come from an array, but it's a little bit of trouble to go get that many images. So we'll just make them all the icon that we got for free. I guess technically, since we're setting them all the same, we could actually put it up here, which would be fine. But in general, they wouldn't all be the same. But it serves the purposes that I want, and the only thing that I want to prove is that you can serve up different views, right? So here it is with buttons, or sorry, with image views instead of buttons. And you can see the image views won't consume the click, so you can see the click comes through no problem. So you kind of got that feature back. So if I click some row down here, I guess that was row 12. Cool. So kept the slides up a little here. Serving up buttons, serving up image views. You can see that those are pretty neat. The one trouble that you run into is that for what we've been doing now, we're serving up like a specific type of view. Odds are that a lot of apps that you'd see, like imagine if you had like a YouTube video browser, right? Like you might want an image over here and a title and a rating and the number of views. You might want all sorts of stuff. So if you want something that's more complex, you can make your own custom compound views. What we're talking about here is we're not really talking about subclassing views and doing all the painting and the canvas. We'll do that later in the quarter. That's not today. We're just talking about subclassing a view group to make what a lot of people call a compound control or a compound view. And so this you can kind of make your own specific thing that can go into your list view. So what we're going to do, the view group that we're going to subclass is going to be a linear layout. We're going to make a horizontal linear layout, and we're going to subclass it. And we're going to call it row view. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's make a new class called row view, whose superclass is linear layout. So right click over here, new class, row view, superclass, linear layout. You can see that it's yelling at you saying, hey, give me my constructor. That's easy enough. Really no need to store off the context because everything's going to happen in the constructor. So we'll just play right here. So some things that we're going to do. First off, I want this to be a horizontal linear layout. So within the linear layout class, there is a constant called horizontal. So I'll just go ahead and set that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create two text views, and we're going to put them in the linear layout. We're going to start small and work our way up. So we're going to create two text views, and we're going to want to reference them later. So I'm going to create them as member variables. We'll give them very original names. We'll call it left text view and right text view. And so we're just going to go ahead and create them. Their constructor is going to want a context, but that's easy because it got passed into here. So lefty and a righty. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add them to the linear layout. So we're going to add the left one first because the order matters here. And then we'll add the right one. Now there's a lot more that we're going to do with this eventually. Eventually we're going to change the properties to make it pretty-ish. But what we'd like to do now is we would like to be able to set the text that's going to go into these text view from the adapter. So let's make two public methods to set the text. Set left text, and so if somebody passes in, we'll just have them pass in a string. That string can be used to set the left text. And then very similar thing for the right side as well. I might be typing too fast for you to keep up. Just pause it, type in what you need, and get yourself caught up. Conceptually, it should be pretty straightforward, though. So if you're not typing it in, you probably kept up just fine. And try to avoid copy-paste errors. Great. So now we've got a very simple compound custom control. It's atomic, it's reusable, it's just the simple building block that we can put in wherever we want. It's just got a left and a right text view, and you can set the text on it. Back over on the adapter. So instead of creating an image view, now we're going to create a row view. So some things are going to have to change. Our constructor is going to have to be for a row view. Set image resource doesn't make any sense anymore. If we're converting a view, we want to make sure it's typecast to row view. All this does is this just makes the compiler not complain. That's really all it does. It's not changing anything. It's just saying, hey, this is really, this convert view, it's really a row view. So feel free to assign it to a row view because it's going to be fine. The object is really a row view. And then what we'd like to do with this view is we would like to set the left text to, let's make it, we'll add a couple spaces here. The left one will just put the position. Let's make it start with 1 based instead of 0 based. And we'll add a period. And then for the right text, just to kind of get the ball rolling, just make it your name. So my name is Dave Fisher. And so really we just want to do as little as is necessary just to see this compound control in action. So hopefully it will print out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 coming down on that left text view. And then on the right side, it'll repeat Dave Fisher every single time. Cool. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Dave Fisher, Dave Fisher, Dave Fisher. You can add more, however many you like. How many times do you like to see your own name? If you click it, it still says you pressed row 12. Eventually we're going to improve that as well. So we've got a compound view, which is cool. We're happy about it. We've made this compound view. We've put stuff into it. We can do better. The thing that we'll change first is we don't want them all to say Dave Fisher. Where's the fun in that? So what we're going to do is we're going to put in an array resource. There are different ways we could have done this, but it's good practice to put it in an array resource with the months. Let's just go ahead and see what it's going to look like. So it's just going to be a string array with all the months in it. So just kind of recap how we do that. So go to Views, then I'm going to use the shortcut key Option Command N to bring up an Android XML file. And I'm just going to call it arrays.xml. Some people put their string arrays in strings.xml. That's totally fine. But I've seen some people also make their own arrays.xml, and I've been doing that. So we're going to create a new string array. I'm just going to call it months. And inside of it, I'm going to add some items. I'm going to start with January. And to be honest, I like to also, sometimes the GUI is faster, but sometimes I find it just as quick just to copy paste some things, right? So if I want all 12 months, pretty easy to do. I'll just pause the video here and magically finish them all. With a little movie magic there, presto, type them all in. You could also, I mean, for something like this, you could just copy paste it from the slides. Just as good, right? Once we've got our string resource, we're going to use that to set this right text. Since we're going to reference it, so get view is called a lot, right? So it probably makes more sense to capture it in a function that's going to only get called once, which is in this case the constructor. So it might be nice just to go ahead and just capture the months array. One way you can capture it is you can say context dot get resources dot, and then I believe it's get string array. Yep, right there. It's r dot array dot months. Then I suppose we should make this member variable string array called mmonths array. Great. So now we've got this little resource, and we've loaded it up with our months. And then what I'm going to do is just instead of printing Dave Fisher, I'm just going to print out the months array with the position, and I'm just going to modulus it with 12, just so that it doesn't roll over, right? And so now presto changeo, it'll say something different for each row. So it should say January, February, March, April, May, and as I add more, they get added, which is kind of neat. And you can see my modulus 12 comes in handy. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to change our toast. So instead of saying you pressed like row 13, it's going to say like you pressed January or something like that. Catch my slides up a little bit here, so grabbing the string resources and then plugging it into that location. So if we wanted it to say you pressed January, then what we need to do is people get the item by calling this getItem method. Right now it returns null. So it would be nice if we went ahead and we returned the object for that row. So the item is, it should be kind of like the data that represents that row. Like what is the thing that is that row? So I'm just going to say, hey, it's the string for the month. That's what I really care about. And what I would like to do is in my toast, instead of just saying you pressed row in the position, I'm going to say what month they pressed. So the way we do that is for our adapter, we say get item at that position. So instead of just printing out the position, I'm going to say, hey, adapter, get me the item that's at this position, and it'll print that out instead. So you can see this is one of many reasons why it is important to implement these other two, the get item, get ID, because people will expect that they're implemented for their use, right? If you're using your own code, yeah, you can write whatever you want. So you can say you pressed April, you press May, October. Cool. And to be honest, the way that we're doing this add view is a little atypical. Typically what people do is they will reference an array, and we'll talk about that next time. We're going to talk about something called an array adapter, and we'll get more into that. We're just kind of showing you some of the features and things that you can do with this introductory app. So catch the slides up again. We've got it. It's working. It's saying the different months, which is cool. We implemented get item. We improved the toast. We can do better. What we're going to do next is we're just going to try to make the graphics look a little bit better. One way you could do that that we're going to do first is in code. You could set all these different features, right? So you could change these properties to make it better. You could set font sizes, you could set colors, you could set margins, all kinds of things. Because it's not really the focus of this lecture, I'm just going to copy paste it from the slides. If you're following along, I recommend you do the same. And so there's a bunch of properties that I've just kind of put in here. Nothing too sacred. I made the background be yellow, but the left text view will actually be cyan, so it'll kind of be cyan on the left, yellow on the right. I've set a minimum width for the left, a text color, a size, some padding even. For the right one, a text color, a size, and some padding on it. And if we were to run this now, it would look very different. So you can see you can do about whatever you want with the properties to describe how this looks. So you can see it looks very different now. And we could stop here on this app if we wanted. You can see that clicking on something, it still shows what you clicked. It doesn't actually matter where you click. If I click on the number, it's actually just selecting that row. There's one kind of problem though. What is all this setting of graphic stuff doing in code? That's not how we do things. So the question is, it's good, you could set whatever you wanted. What's going on with this graphical stuff? Could we use an XML resource for this? And the answer is yes. Yes, we could. And that is a better way to do it. So let's do that instead. Using the XML resources, you can use the GUI editor that's built into Eclipse. It gives you that visual feedback so you can actually try different things much faster. And it also has this advantage of it makes your code easier to maintain because it's really following the model view controller paradigm well and separating out that view stuff into its own external resource. So let's create an XML called RowView. So inside the layout, create a new XML file called RowView.xml. We're going to make its root element be a linear layout, so that was already set the way we wanted, and it's going to go into the layout folder. And what we're going to do is we're going to, I like to bring up my outline and properties for playing with this stuff. We're going to make it look something, make your choice, make it look something like this. I thought this would look good. What this is a text view, and then there's a view here that's just kind of a red bar, and then another text view. I called these left text view and right text view, no surprise there. And then for the linear layout, it's got this background. If you'd like this background, you could click on this link from the slides, or also from the course homepage. You can click on it in either place. So if you go to www.rosehulman.edu/Android, you can find it on the course website. Or if you got the slides up, you can just download it here. I'll go ahead and grab it again. And then you can copy it into your drawable folder. If you're using a version that has a lot of different drawable folders, just make it drawable, because I didn't make multiple versions, I just made one version. And I'll tell you what, it's best for you to practice this stuff, so I would recommend you pause the video, see if you can make this RowView.xml look just how you like it. Cool, give it a whirl. Alright, so I'll do it as well, just in case you're having trouble with things. So what I want to do here is I want to stick on a text view, and then after that I want to stick on just a plain old view, and then after that I'm going to stick on another text view. This linear layout, I want it to be horizontal. That actually is the default, but I'm going to set it anyway. I want its background on this linear layout to be that image. Great. I'm going to set it to wrap the content on the height. And then you can see it still looks kind of funny. I think that's because the view is taken up, is forcing it to be tall. So for the view, I think if you say, actually, let's just go ahead and give these things specific values. It's actually just going to be, the view is going to be a 44 tall, oops, I put it in the wrong place, by 3 wide. And that view is going to be red, so I'm just going to set its background to some red color. I chose D00 for a kind of like a darker red. So you can see it's trying to fit the sizes of the text views. So let's go ahead and set some things on them. This first text view, I'm actually just going to hard code it to be 44 by 44. So it's just kind of a little box over here. Its ID is going to be left text view. Its title, or its text does not matter. But I'm going to go ahead and put in 1 point just so I can get a visual feedback for what it's going to look like later. I'm going to need to set the text color. Again, it'd be best if you used a resource colors to put it in here, but we're just going to type it in. And let's center this baby up. So gravity, center. Great. And let's go ahead and fix the other one up a little as well. Let's go ahead and make its ID right text view. Right text view. And let's make it black. And we'll just say January. Again, you don't even have to type anything there, but I want to kind of know what it's going to look like. And then it looks like we could use a little left margin as well. Let's throw on a, I don't know, a 10 left margin. It looks like I typed 15. 15 will work just as well. Cool. And if you wanted to, you can make the font a little bit bigger. So let's see here, my font, I wonder what 18 would look like. And again, for fonts, it's recommended that you use SP, because that will respect the user's preferred scaling factor, so they're scalable density independent pixels. Cool. So I think that looks pretty good. Certainly good enough for government work, right? So now we've created rowview.xml. Great. We need to use it is the next thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to make changes to the constructor. We're actually going to make so many changes that it's actually just easier just to comment it out and just start over. Finish with you guys. So it wants us to make a constructor, and I think that sounds like a good plan. Let's just make a new one. And so what we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to inflate the XML resource, and then capture the text views to the member variables. Great. So inflating the XML resource, that's actually nothing new to us. It just kind of looks different. So one thing you've seen before is you've seen for activities, they have this special thing that says set content. That is great for activities. What it does is it inflates that resource, so that's great for them. With menus, you may remember we created something called a menu inflator. And the way it looked is we got the menu inflator and then we used it to inflate the menu. This is obviously not a menu, so we can't use that. But the structure is very similar. What we want is called a layout inflator. So I'll just call it layout inflator. And much like the menus, you could say get menu inflator, you can say get layout inflator. But this is a method that you call on an activity. That actually turns out to be okay. So we were passed in a context, but I happen to know that this context, it really is the activity. So it's not just a context, it's more than that. It's an activity. So we're going to say, hey, context, you're really an activity. Typecast it as an activity. Once we've got an activity, then we can call get layout inflator. So kind of a little bit annoying, but we've got it. And then inflators, they do one task, right? They inflate. They take a resource, so r.layout.rowView, and they inflate it into something. So in this case, they're going to inflate it into this. With menus, they inflated it into the past menu. So we're going to inflate that resource and load it up into this linear layout. Then the last thing you have to do should be something that's very comfortable, and that is just capturing the two text views from the resource. Oops. Find view by ID, r.id, hopefully you called it left text view, and then right text view. Cool. And so really the two constructors look entirely different, but they're doing the exact same concepts, right? They're creating text views. It's just the one did it with an XML. They're adding them in to the linear layout, and they're setting a bunch of properties. The only difference is that this method is much better. But anything we could have done here, we actually could have done in code as well. It's just kind of better to use in XML. Whew. Let's see if we've got a finished product. So a lot of stuff going on there. So now it should look like our XMLs and Presto. We've got this nice looking, kind of looks like a sheet of paper going with the months. If we click on one of them, it says you pressed March. We've still got all of the same features in terms of scrolling. And you can see that you can really add a lot to an app with that visual appeal, right? So the visual appeal is kind of everything in apps, right? So that user interface, really, you do need to spend a lot of time on it because people care how things look. That's just how it works. So let's just kind of close this thing down. Here's the row.xml. Here's a reminder for how you do the layout inflator. And this one looks like a winner. So there's a lot more we could do, but we're going to go ahead and stop this app here, and we'll pick up next time talking about an array adapter, which will be in a different type of adapter. And eventually we'll start talking about different types of adapter views, the spinners, the galleries, the grids, and we'll get you some practice with the different types of adapter views. Take-home message is there's an adapter, takes in the data in a blank view, serves up a bunch of views for the adapter view, and there are lots of combinations of adapters and adapter views. Great, hopefully this is a really good introduction that makes you feel comfortable with this concept. Look forward to seeing you next time where we talk about some more specifics. See you then.